What can Williamson do here? The crowd of about 20 get in behind Kane Williamson. Asita Fernando into Williamson. The final delivery of this test match. Oh, and they run the by. And no! There's a direct hit. They're going upstairs. They're celebrating, but
he's out. I think he's out.
I think he thinks he's out too.
To director. We have an umpire review.
Wow, could the third umpire act like he gives a shit?
And Williamson's asking again for the short ball, and how that's not. Look at the dive. Get in there, Kane Williamson. You are a little beauty. You are a little beauty, Kane Williamson. You little master. He's done it. Kane Williamson has done it. He has won the game for New Zealand. And back-to-back test matches. New Zealand have come back from nowhere.
Live from the Export Beer Garden Studios, you're listening to the BYC. And if there's one thing we can say about this current crop of Black Caps, they like cutting it fine. Indeed, it's taken till this afternoon for my buttocks to unclench from the spine-tingling victory on Monday. Whilst many are heralding the birth of baseball, there's nothing like the slow, grinding, anxiety-inducing feeling of a last ball victory after 5 days of Test cricket. At times it seemed the Black Caps had blown it, and credit must be given to the plucky Sri Lankan side, who performed significantly better than many had predicted, and who, it could be argued, were unlucky not to be suckling on the teat of victory themselves. But it's a Test win, and by God, we'll take it. But one thing's for sure, there's plenty to dissect, so let's get into it. Dylan Cleaver, have you recovered from Monday?
Well, not really, actually. And there's a slightly obtuse reason for that.
Yes.
And that's because the ACC commentary shirts were in a terrible state, and I have since got a bit of a rash on my chest. Staphylococcus, I believe it is.
I should let the listeners know, actually, regarding the ACC commentary. We have a rack of white shirts there. And people just come in and put them on and then biff them once they've sort of done it for the day. I would suspect, pull forward, that it's been, there's shirts there that haven't been washed in many years. So I'm not surprised that Cleaver's got some sort of staph infection.
Yeah, look, absolute rookie move. I run a BYO system these days, so you learn, you find out the hard way, and you should learn from that, Dylan.
Yep, lesson learned.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to see it. I can imagine how foul it is.
You're just scratching.
Yeah. You just have to look at the filth of Mike Lane to understand where you got that from. But anyway, boys, Andy writes, all this talk about Bazball and Gazball, and all along it was Dazball. That was about to change the world. Dylan, your thoughts?
Oh, what a player.
Yeah.
Daryl Mitchell, man of the match for his double of 102 and 81. Look, I feel a little bit cheap for doing this, but I'm going to quote. I wrote a piece about him on the bounce and just the improbability of his rise. Look, he averages 40 in first-class cricket, which means he's a good player.
Yes.
It does not signal that he's going to be a great Test player, and that's what he is. And I reckon, and this is what I wrote, he bats with a chip on his shoulder, and that chip keeps telling him, they don't think I'm good enough to be here, but I don't just belong. I'm better than them, so they can stick that up their ass. And that's kind of how he bats, with a I might not be the world's most technical or fluent player. It may have taken me longer to get here than it took the Flash Harrys and that, but shit, I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere.
And I think that's a really fair point, Dylan. And on that, Paul Ford, I was saying on our radio show yesterday, I think what son of a Mitch has is he has his dad's sporting brain. I mean, you could say a lot about his dad in terms of the way that he approached the media and things like that. It was all a bit confusing, but you couldn't question his sporting nous. And I suspect that Daz is one of those players too that just has a really good head on his shoulders and is able to assess a situation and play the right game for that exact moment in a Test match.
I think that, that sporting nous point is a really fair one. And, I mean, it's very hard to dispute that, given what he's done since he's come into Test cricket as what was perceived wrongly as a journeyman player who was always going to just be bits and pieces, and if he could get a few wickets and a few runs, that'd be great. But he's turned into a world-class player. 880 odd runs at 80 over the last 14 months is, that's not just luck. Obviously, it's an extraordinary set of performances. And it's an interesting thing. I was thinking about what Dylan was saying and then what you just said, Jason. It's almost like, Mitchell was combining that siege mentality that maybe his dad had with that. It's almost a Western Australian approach to cricket. And, if you're going to be going around thinking, being that aggressive in a New Zealand cricketing environment, you're going to stand out. And it's interesting. He's taken that approach definitely to his batting in this innings, whacking his first ball for 6 back over Jayasuriya's head. And the way he bowls, he's not causing a hell of a lot of damage, but he's pumped up and he's going hammer and tongs. And I think, 81 off 86 and then 102, or other way around, it was interesting when he came to the wicket with Williamson. You thought, most players would come to the wicket and be like, I'm just going to leave it to Kane and just get ones and Kane can do it. But they scored 1,000 twos, and Son of a Mitch provided a hell of a lot more than just support for Kane Williamson. He was really the catalyst for cranking that innings up and making that run chase more achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, no one hits a better straight six down the ground than Matt Jay. That's a glorious shot. So, in summary, Sri Lanka 355 and 302, New Zealand 373 and 285 for 8. I have to say, fellas, a frustrating first day. We were doing the commentary on the ACC there. Green as a wicket. Spoke to Matt Henry yesterday on the radio show, actually, and there was a lot of frustration. I don't recall how many times they beat the bat, but Southey and Henry had the Sri Lankans in all sorts of trouble, and then the foot was taken off the neck, and the Sri Lankans got away on us a bit with our second-tier bowlers. Can I say that, Dylan?
Yeah, you can. It was an interesting contrast to both the first innings where we had that bizarre hour. I think we might have both been on the mic between 11 and midday and 1 on that very first session where suddenly we were going for Wagner ball on a green wicket, and New Zealand had beaten the bat several times. Henry and Southey were close to unplayable at times, but it felt like they started really reaching for wickets rather than letting it come to them, and that's when Sri Lanka got away from them a little bit, and then Sri Lanka kind of returned the favour, but not till the end of the New Zealand innings. They'd actually bowled far better up front. Top order was in trouble, failed a bit, but they will forever rue in that match the way they bowled to New Zealand's tail. I mean, Matt Henry got away with them with a really well struck 72. Tim Southey got 20 odd, I think. I think Wagner got 20 odd, and in the end, a lot of things happened between there and the end of the game, clearly, which we'll talk about. But those tail end runs in that New Zealand first innings were the difference between the two sides in the end.
Yeah, and I almost get the feeling, Paul Ford, that Southey's taking his batting a little more seriously now that he's skipper almost. But I've got to say, mate, I was genuinely surprised by the Sri Lankan side. And someone actually made the point to me, and a very fair point. Well, they're in the running to be in the final for the World Test Championship, so they're not a bad side. Nonetheless, when I saw that wicket, that first hour, I thought this is going to be absolute carnage. Full credit to Sri Lanka. They battled the entire way through that Test match.
Yeah, I thought that. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it was one of the most incredible tests in Test history, and that normally doesn't happen unless both teams have turned up and done some pretty bloody good things. And, when you look at what Sri Lanka had done coming in, they'd done very well, very reminiscent actually of New Zealand, I guess, in the last World Test Championship cycle, punching above their weight, really strong at home, doing some great things. It's awesome to see some of these so-called you use the word second tier about our bowling attack, but we're really second tier Test cricket nations, and it's almost one of the sort of travesties of New Zealand having beaten this Sri Lankan team in this first test that it extinguishes their chances of being in the final against one of the big boys, because I think we know who most of the world would have been supporting in that. And coming into this series, Sri Lanka hadn't played cricket. Angelo Matthews was talking about the fact that Sri Lanka play about 5 Test matches a year. So unbelievable to think that they came in and performed so well in conditions where they have traditionally not done particularly well. Their last two-match test series was against Pakistan in July 2022. So, a massive layoff.
Yeah, I remember it was a number of months. And just on that, Dylan Cleaver, I was really impressed with the Sri Lankan Seamers. Yeah. They just ran in all day long. And as you mentioned earlier, they had the New Zealand side in all sorts at times. They were unrelenting is how I would describe their bowling.
Yeah, and they were incredibly unlucky in that second innings on that the fourth night where they had Williamson and Latham on toast. Rajita was swinging it around corners. Lahuru Kumara is a very muscular, bustling bowler with real pace.
He's built like a brick shithouse, isn't he?
Yeah, and Ajita Fernando again. I thought they were excellent. And the curious thing about it was they looked like an attack that had grown up on New Zealand-type wickets, not the dry turning pitches that they were more obviously used to in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, well, actually what that said to me, and this is the sort of overall impression I got about the Sri Lankans, is that they had a good game plan and that they were well coached and they knew what they were about. You contrast that with the New Zealanders in that first innings pull forward, Southey and Henry apart. I felt we really fell away on the bowling when we went to what I called the second tier, your third and fourth drops. But then that kind of turned around again in the second innings with old Tick getting the wickets in the second innings and shoving it right up us.
Yeah, you got the sense in that. And Frank had done at Hagley Oval and what they'd done to Sri Lanka a bunch of times over the last few years, and it just didn't happen. And it looked like about 63 minutes of patience that was burned up, and then they went back to, let's try this short ball theory. It was frustrating, and the Sri Lankan seamers gave us a lesson in mastering our own conditions, and luckily learnt from that seemingly in that second innings.
Hey, well, let's not overlook too, fellas, the majesty of Steady the Ship. How good, man. He's been under pressure the last sort of year and a half a little bit for the first time really in his career, but quality is quality, and he showed it again.
Yeah, someone actually had a good point when they wrote into me and said, this is Kane Mark II. Kane Mark I was all beautiful classical drives through the covers. He was a very good puller of the ball and plays that kind of back foot punch square of the wicket. This version of Kane, I guess we'll call it the post-tennis elbow version, is a little more compact, perhaps a little less flourish. The drives are even more checked than they used to be, but he just knows how to bat. And that first 35 runs of the second innings century were hard work.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was dropped. It wasn't the world's hardest. It wasn't a sitter by any means, but it wasn't the world's hardest catch to a keeper. He was perilously close to being LBW. If it was given out on the field, it would have remained out. But as it was, he survived a review on umpire's call on leg stump. But then once he got in, towards the end of that innings, I just had this warm, comforting feeling that, that is the guy. When you're chasing in a time-poor situation in pretty tricky conditions, that is the guy that you want there batting out there. And that goes across all countries as well. I just thought he was fantastic.
Yeah. You can wax lyrical if you like, Paul Ford, about the great man.
Yeah, look, it was incredible. And your first 50 runs off 120, the next 50 off something like 50 and probably those last 21 unbeaten, even faster than that. And it was just majestic watching him go through the gears. Of course, the deep irony of him winning the game flat on his face, having not hit the ball, a pretty unusual way to finish a game. But look, just that modesty, the unassuming brilliance, almost apologetic as he hits milestones or gets things done. And that catch drop catch by Dick Weller, the little fella, former fruit seller. I mean, it was is one of the most expensive drop catches you could ever see. And as I was watching Kane's serene calmness and almost unbearable calmness, it brought to mind. I think it was himself. He described himself when he was batting with Brendan McCullum as being the library at the theme park. And I think it was Michael Atherton said that he bats with a pillow. And you could see that he was just desperately trying not to get out, but you kind of always knew if he gets going. That shot off the third to last ball to pierce the field through the offside was just extraordinary in terms of the technical ability to do that, the amazing timing. I mean, he's an absolute unbelievable player, and 4 tons in the 4th innings. If he does that, we pretty much win every time. He's up in the pantheon of the absolute legends of the game in 4th innings, alongside Graham Smith, Ricky Ponting, guys like that. That, as you said before, you'd put your life on them batting, if they were batting for it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
He also passed Ross Taylor. Not passed Ross Taylor. He also joined Ross Taylor on 40 international centuries for New Zealand. His split is 27-13.
Yes.
I think Ross Taylor's was 21 ODI and 19 Tests. Neither of them have got a T20.
Yes. And then drama, as if we didn't have enough drama. And this was really interesting. I was doing the radio show when Chris Gaffney started making some calls down the league side. Unfortunately, I had to have the audio off at the time, and I was like, what the is going on here? And I could see him having heated discussions with the Sri Lankans. And I was thinking, what? He's lost his mind. Does he suddenly think this is a one-day game? But no. It's the new rule, and he invoked the law 22.1.4, which is about negative bowling, Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, I think it's a great rule, actually, and it was brought in, I can't remember the combatants. I'm pretty certain it was Pakistan trying to slow either England or Australia in another time-poor situation by bowling wide of leg stump, setting a field where really the most they were going to go for is 1, and even that was pretty high risk. So the ICC brought in this rule where if the bowling side is deemed to be employing negative tactics, then the umpire is duty-bound to switch to limited overs interpretation of the wide rule, which is what Chris Gaffney did. Ballsy call.
Yeah, it took some kahunas, man, to do that, because umpires don't want to be noticed or part of the drama. They want to stay out of it, but it took some real balls to make the call.
Yeah, my only concern about it is that when Neil Wagner does that left arm round to the left-handed batters, he might be kind of going in around the rib region, but is that any less negative? I mean, does that give the batting team any more options than what a left-arm orthodox bowling wide down the leg side to a right-handed batter does? I think you've got to be a little bit careful, but I do, in principle, think the rule is a good one and should be invoked more often.
Paul Ford.
Limp-wristed umpires probably won't call it. It's been bandied in and around that New Zealand team. I remember Graham Hick complaining about it. I think it was in Perth where Wagner was exactly what you said, Matthew Wade. He wondered whether the umpires considered it negative bowling, just sort of dog whistling the other one. I think that Ajaz Patel also had been called for this against Shreyas. As we always say, we don't mind what the umpires do as long as they're consistent.
Yeah, I think he's a good umpire, Chris.
Yeah,
I really do.
He was getting pissed off with the New Zealanders for the batters always having water coming on and changing gloves too. So he was quite spiky this test.
Yeah, fair cop.
Good to see.
And you're right, Paul Ford. I mean, some umpires probably wouldn't have called that scenario. I certainly would have, mate. I just got the vibe there that you were maybe having a bit of a dig at me. But hey, anyway, another great victory, 2 in a row now for New Zealand. Basin Reserve Test, great news. They've listened to the BYC. Doug Bracewell is back. Yep. Piss poor news. Will Young dropped. And that, mate, I am filthy about that. The poor guy has just had a ratchet run.
He has. Yeah.
And I think he absolutely deserves a go here.
He deserves an extended run, not just this bring you in, you fail, bugger off again. And the poor bugger had to go just up the road, just up State Highway 1 to Rangiora, and then played on a dog track in the Plunket Shield, where I think Canterbury got 150 odd. I don't think CD, well, they didn't look like they were going to get close to that the last time I saw. So, yeah, he's not having a good time of it. And just on the whole, I mean, clearly the inference here is how does Will Young get dropped after so few opportunities and a certain Henry Nicholls keeps getting picked. So I decided to run the numbers on this a little bit. And I just thought, in my time of following New Zealand cricket, who are the batters that there's been the most chatter about, like, oh, God, how's he still in the team? How do they keep picking this guy? And in my lifetime, it's kind of John Parker, John Morrison, Jeff Howarth, Ken Rutherford, Jeet Raval, Daniel Flynn, Craig McMillan. Those are the guys that I can really remember. I'm not talking about guys that just came in and played a couple of tests and were no good and were biffed out. I'm talking about guys that played a lot of tests that the public was starting to get really antsy about. So Nichols has now played 15 innings without a 50. Not even a 40 in that, but that's a little bit of a confected stat. So I'm just going to go with the gap between 50s. So he's 15 innings, completed innings, that doesn't include not outs, without a 50. John Parker played 14, although he did get a 47 not out in amongst that, and he was dropped during that run of failure. John Morrison was the highest, 16 innings without a 50, but he was actually dropped for a 6-year period in the middle of that. Jeff Howarth, 14, and his career ended then. No more. Martin Crowe actually was 13. He got dropped in the middle of that. That was to start his career. Obviously turned out to be magnificent. Ken Rutherford, 10. Jeet Raval, 12. Daniel Flynn, 13. And I don't think that was an uninterrupted either. And Craig McMillan, actually, I was surprised given the grief that he used to get. Actually, 9 innings was his longest between 50s. So we're getting into unprecedented selection protection territory. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like pull forward, Harry Knapp's there. He's obviously a good team man, and, that's what all the lads are saying. He's a good team fella, and maybe that's what's keeping him in. But, mate, it defies sort of logic to me that Will Young is not given an opportunity in that situation. Waiting!
Yeah, look, I agree, and just watching Henry Nichols, it just looks like he's out of sorts as well. I mean, I'm no technician. I haven't run the analytics like Dylan has, but it just feels like something's changed, and it's almost like when Ross Taylor lost his eyes or something. He just looks a little bit off, and he looks like a man that's batting under pressure, and he's playing shots like he has to score quickly and getting out in frustrating ways. I do wonder. I mean, I feel like this is almost a mean thing to say, but, he came in, he had a pretty tricky run initially. Then he had this real purple patch. And if you go back and, look at some of the media coverage around that, it was quite a lot was like, yeah, it was a good knock, but it definitely wasn't chanceless. He was one of the luckiest cricketers going around. And then we've had this most recent period. And, yeah, I do just wonder, what's going on and whether the selectors are being a bit too generous here.
And I think actually the saddest thing about this is I've got a funny feeling Will Young is going to be overtaken pretty shortly too. Yeah.
So. It's a travesty. New Zealand versus Sri Lanka at the Basin over the years. I'm assuming someone here has some stats.
That'll be Paul.
I thought you were going to bring those. But
My prediction would be total New Zealand dominance.
Yeah, sweet. No, well, that's not too bad. It's the 67th test at the Basin, 7 tests versus Sri Lanka since 1983. And I was just going to mention three things. So 1991, we just cannot forget Aravinda de Silva's 267. And I had a quick look about the famous partnership between Martin Crowe, 299, of course, and Andrew Jones, 186. That 451-run partnership is still the third biggest partnership in the history of Test cricket. It doesn't hold the third wicket record. That is now held by Sangakkara and Jaya Wardner, a couple of Sri Lankans, so appropriate. 2006, Sri Lanka beat us. Well, Malinga and Muralitharan beat us. They took 17 wickets, and Sangakkara went nuts. And then 2018, that was the Tom Latham show, 264 not out. And, of course, Angelo Matthews, who has continued to be an incredible player in New Zealand, and Kusal Mendis batted basically a day and a half to save that test match, plus a bit of rain. So, yeah, some good memories for both teams, I guess, at the Basin. I can't wait to get along there on Friday. The weather looks a little bit iffy, so do keep an eye on that forecast if you're about to sort of take a day's annual leave.
Yes, indeed. Well, more news, the one-day squad announced, and boy, oh boy, hey, boys, hey! The New Zealand one-day squad, Tom Latham, Finn Allen, Chad Bowles, Will Young, Henry Nichols, Daryl Mitchell, Glenn Phillips, Mark Chapman, Tom Blundell, Michael Bracewell, Henry Henry Shipley, Ish Sodhi, Matt Henry, Ben Lister, Lockie Ferguson, Blair Tickner. No Southey, Williamson, Conway or Santner as they go straight for the IPL following the Test series. Finn Allen, Glenn Phillips, Lockie Ferguson all go after the first.
First ODI.
Yeah, first ODI, yeah.
Yeah, so, well, a couple of new faces there. I'll let you wax lyrical about Ben Lister, but Chad Bowes is an interesting selection. Plays for Canterbury now, but he's not young, actually. He's 30. He's South African, but in the Ford Trophy this year, I guess he caught the eye with 373 runs at 46.6, striking at over 100, which is good against the new bull. He's also in the midst of one of the more bizarre Plunket Shield campaigns you'll ever come across. He has played, I think, every game for Canterbury. He's scored 2 centuries this Plunket Shield season and still hasn't scored 300 runs aggregate. So he's very much a 100 or nothing kind of guy in the Red Bull.
Yeah, similar.
He captains South Africa under-19 in the 2012 under-19 World Cup, and they beat New Zealand in a playoff for third. That South African team didn't have a huge number of big names. So they had Quinton de Kock, they had himself, and Tanis de Bruyn, but that New Zealand under-19 team, that was pretty strong, actually. It was captained by Will Young. It had Ben Horn, Joe Carter, Robbie O'Donnell, Cam Fletcher, Ish Sodhi, Jacob Duffy, Teo Van Work from home, and Matt Quinn. So it was really quite a strong under-19 team, but Chad Bowes' South Africa destroyed them in the playoff for third. He came out to New Zealand in 2015 to play for the Chris Harris-coached Sydenham Cricket Club. I think the move was facilitated by Stephen Fleming. And when he was in South Africa, he went to Kearney College, which is very, very posh and has produced such players as Kyle Abbott, Andrew Hudson, and the aforementioned Chad Bowes.
Looking forward to seeing him, actually. Some credentials there. Well, Benny Lister, very excited to see him. And I just love watching the guy, a big strapping left armour from Auckland. His record, first class, 67 wickets, and I think he mentioned this in the last podcast, Paul Ford, at 26, which is pretty good, I think. Lister, 49 wickets at 35, and T20, 43 wickets at 27.2. But I don't know, putting the statistics to the side, I just like the look of him as a bowler. And he does a lot with the ball in the air. He's a big lad, so he gets really good bounce. I think he's going to be a bit of a handful, fellas.
Good.
Thanks, mate.
And with him and Lockie steaming in, that'll be good. And,
yeah.
Look, from a Sri Lankan point of view too, these games do matter. They haven't qualified for the World Cup. They're doing so badly in the ICC Super League that they are outside contention at the moment. They've got to win this. They've got to win the one dayers basically to get past. I think it's the West Indies right down the bottom of the table. So they're in a duel with Ireland and to take over the West Indies and qualify for the World Cup.
Interesting stuff. Now let's turn to more Test cricket. Aussie versus India. The fourth Test there. Gosh, I watch a fair amount of that, fellas. Pretty tedious, boring jaw. Not a lot really going on, in my view. What was your thought on that, Dylan? Did you get to see any of it?
Yeah, I did. The kind of most interesting thing for me was just to listen and see who Matt the Bat Hayden was going to have a pop at next. Not surprisingly, he had a pop at the selectors again for the. It's starting to get a well-worn theme now. The fact that Travis Head wasn't picked for the first Test, which is admittedly a joke, and I think he scored 90 in the second innings. Khawaja was silky again, didn't bat in the second innings, and the Virat, Shubman Gill got a very nice 100. But the Virat Kohli's first Test ton for more than 3 years, and he cashed in with a big one, but it was pretty easy going for batting out there. And it kind of, it's what do we do about this? We have the strongest, wealthiest, most powerful cricket nation in the world just basically doing what they want to manipulate series. So the first 2 tests were played on Bunsen burners. Australia had no preparation games. It predictably just were skittled. India go 2-0 up. Australia get used to the conditions and actually fire back with some good spin of their own, win the third one. So India, what do they do for that 4th test?
Let's get a road.
They just bake a road that there's zero chance of getting a result on, win the series. I mean, to me, it reeks of, it's slightly worse than petty cricket politics, and politics is probably an apt description for this particular test as well, which Paul will explain. But there's something, I mean, it's not cheating. I don't want to go that far, but it's just not quite right. And yeah, I'm a bit tired of it.
Waiting. He's unleashing today. Yeah, wait. No,
I just want to watch good cricket.
Yeah, I agree, man.
I want to watch good cricket between 2 good teams. I don't want this bullshit with pitches and that.
Yeah, Paul Ford.
This is Ashwin's point, though, right? He says, who gets to decide what's a good pitch? You know, we've got this arguably, and maybe it's based in sort of Western culture, English conditions. What does a good cricket pitch look like? I know what I like, and it's probably very aligned with what you both like, but it's an interesting cultural point. I do think, though, that there is a debate to be had around what are the parameters around pitch preparation, influence that boards are having over it, all of those sorts of things. You know, we saw this feels very reminiscent of what happened around neutral umpires, and the ICC stepped in, and I think that we could say, it may be imperfect, and you could make it better, and all those sorts of things. But that's worked pretty bloody well, and I do wonder whether these are the types of series and these, this sort of shenanigans that's happening. The ICC putting together pitch preparation teams and sending them around the world in a professional and doing this professionally and consistently. That might be something worth considering. That doesn't mean they have to prepare the same pitch in every place.
No, because that would be boring in itself.
Yeah, exactly. But it's got to be prepared to not be sort of, as you say, sort of taking the piss. Maybe if that's the kind of criteria. Dylan, as well, you just mentioned the politics. I mean, there's just the bizarre, incredible politics of the Indian Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister and all the palaver that was around this match. I mean, just amazing. There's a great piece by Jeff Lemon about the pageantry and comparing it to the Game of Thrones, and I highly recommend it. One little quote here: ushered onto a podium on the field of play along with officials from the BCCI, they watched a dance performance, the two prime ministers, while competing to see who could remain the most impassive, sitting with hands folded in laps and stern expressions. They were carried around in the back of a specifically crafted open vehicle adorned at its back with a splayed cardboard fan of oversized cricket bats and stumps. It was like Angry Anderson had swapped engineering tips with Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones. It's a magnificent little piece. So I'd Google that one if anyone's out there with their fingertips and their browser ready to go.
Great stuff, mate. The Bangers beat England in the T20s in home conditions. Not that surprising, but to be fair, as stated here, the English won the one-day series.
Yeah, they did. The English went 2-0 up in the one-day series, experimented for the third one, lost that, and have been clean swept in the T20s. But again, that was a sort of weird scheduling. It involved obviously none of the test players that were in New Zealand. Not that surprising, but I guess, Bangladesh would be loving that, won't they? Beating the English 3-0 at home.
Yes, Paul.
And it is the first. It's only interesting because I haven't seen one ball of it. I'm just being honest. I'm not interested, but I did see that it is Bangladesh's first time they've ever beaten England in a series for the first time in any format, winning that T20 series. So, the world turns.
Great stuff, mate. Let's look at the domestic game with Canterbury surging ahead of the pack. Stumps Day 2, Canterbury 186 versus CDs 52 for 4. Northern Districts 405 versus Wellington 151 for 6. Auckland 351 for 9 versus Otago's 181 for 3. Ben Horn from Auckland, of course, 137, just his third first-class ton. And Katane Clark, Northern Districts 129, his debut ton, fellas.
Yeah, there's been a bit going on since then, actually. CD cruised past Canterbury in the end with some Josh Clarkson, who's more known probably as a white ball hitter, scoring a century. So they're on 280 odd. Otago have got up to 293 for 5. Glenn Phillips, the Phillips brothers doing well. Glenn Phillips getting 67, and is it Dean or Dale? Dale, isn't it? I keep forgetting that.
Dale Phillips.
Yeah, 79. But most excitedly for me, because I really rate this kid, and I think he's going to be, this will be the third BYC podcast in a row he gets a mention, but Muhammad Abbas scored 97 for Wellington today. So
great
keep
stuff.
an eye on that kid if you aren't already.
Just looking at the table here, Canterbury on 79 points, Northern Districts 59, Wellington 55, Central Districts 49, Otago 43, and Auckland at the bottom of the pile there on 40. The Golden Box, McConchie 686, Bruce 633, Popley 623, the Silver Sweatband, Duffy 29, Henry 23, Bracewell 23. But right now it's time for Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Yeah, it is, and I've accidentally got the belt. What was it last week? Anyway, yeah, I ended up with it because you guys
And I in the lead.
Anyway,
Jesse Ryder's comeback last week, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I made that up. Yep. South African spin bowler Keshav Maharaj, wrecker of many a New Zealand Test match batting order, requires surgery and is facing a long absence from cricket after rupturing his Achilles tendon in his left heel while celebrating a wicket in the second test against the West Indies on Saturday. He sustained a complete rupture of the tendon and will meet with a surgeon this week. He had appealed for LBW against Kyle Myers. It was given not out, and the South Africans asked for a TV review. He threw his arms out and took one step as he set off on a celebratory run after the review was successful, and then slumped to the floor and clutched his left leg. He was stretchered off. Number 2, during the 4th India-Australia Test in Ahmedabad, perhaps, a discussion on the future of the sport ensued, and there was much emphasis on the fate of 50-over cricket. Ravi Shastri suggested this lifeline: for one-day cricket to survive, I think it should be reduced to 40 overs. And the reason I say this is because when we won the World Cup in 1983, it was a 60-over game. The attention span of people has diminished and it has gone down to 50, and I think it is time for it to now become a 40-over game. Evolve with the times, cricket, and reduce the format. The convergence continues, Dylan Cleaver. And number 3, West Indies women's star Hayley Matthews believes that Venus Williams would make a great cricketer. Of course, tennis is not without its cricket crossovers, with Ashley Barty taking part in the Women's Big Bash for the Brisbane Heat and also turning out for Queensland. Matthews said Williams would be great to watch in an environment where she could thump the ball as far as she could muster. However, she won't be turning out for too many T20 franchises any soon because she's got quite a bit on. She's got an investment empire, 2 major sports team stakes, including the Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles-based Angel City FC. So there you go.
Great stuff. Who is it, me or you?
It's me. Story 3. Serena, not Venus.
What was the Barty one? Is that story 3 too?
Yes.
Wrong team.
No, it wasn't.
You're 50% correct, Jace. Dylan, you are 100% correct.
Damn it. So what's that for me now? 10.5 to Dylan, 7?
We're not doing it like that anymore.
Oh, aren't we?
Jeez. We don't have to
The Oil Trophy will be sent to the North Shore.
Competitive much, do you think?
I just want what's mine.
Hey, but right now it's time for Dylan Cleaver's Obscure Players of the 90s.
Obscure Players of the 90s.
Yeah, what I've discovered as I go up and down the country here is that essentially the entire Otago and Central Districts first-class cricket scene in the 90s was obscure. The rest were really quite settled. But I'm back in Otago, and I have picked out a one-game wonder called Simon Hinton. One match for Otago, right arm medium pacer. He played versus Auckland at Carisbrook. A first change bowler, he got 2 for 62. He batted number 11 and was out for 6 in the first innings, and following on was not out 2 in the second, and Auckland chasing a very small total to win that game. He bowled just the 4 overs, 1 maiden, 0 for 6, and that was it for him. He also played just the 4 matches for Otago A. He played 4 Hawke Cup matches for Central Otago. I believe he was a stalwart of the Clyde Cricket Club, and I really couldn't find out much about him, except for on March the 20th, 1997, he left New Zealand for Australia. He has not been back since. He's had his tools stolen recently from the back of his truck, which he was not happy about. And he occasionally posts fairly dangerous right-wing rhetoric from radio DJ Alan Jones. So I'd love to know if you have any more information on Simon Hinton. I'd love to hear it. Write in to our DMs or the usual addresses. I'm always keen and fascinated to know about some of our more obscure first-class cricketers of the 90s.
Great stuff, Dylan Cleaver. Well, right now it's time for Commentary Nook, and I was thinking about, fellas, it's been a pretty stressful couple of test matches. There's been a lot going on in the world, so I thought maybe we could just sit back for a minute or two and listen to some great moments from the master himself of commentary, the one and only Richie Benaud.
Oh, what a ripper. And gone. That light roller would have about as much of an effect as a couple of koala bears doing the pas de deux. 2 for 22, New Zealand. It's 2 for 222. Well, something has got Greg Dyer, and I'd say it's probably the ball. Well, that was a great piece of fielding by Kim Hughes, but what a sadness for Graham Gooch and for Mrs. Gooch and for any Gooch fans who may be around.
It's not the way to cast the plastic bag.
Always dangerous doing anything into the wind. Have you got those 2 non-fat ones you were talking about in the barnyard? Striking rather a painful blow in the groin area. Now, what would people from Mars think if they were to land here and see that happening on your television screen? A lot of slip, slap, slop going on out there today. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. So it's been a marvellous game here.
You ever get used to knowing which way to brush your hair?
Yeah. His heel's as grey as I am.
A lot of people above us and around us that we can't see.
You wouldn't think you could have such a small commentary box in such a big stand. That was a flat-battered smash. Well, that streaker, we don't know at the moment if it's a boy or a girl streaker.
It's a boy.
A boy.
It's a boy, Rich.
Well, he could have done some injury to Andrew Simons there because he seemed to run straight at him and all of a sudden he was on his back. And that bit of timber with the bazooka in it, it's just an innocent little kookaburra on it.
Come on, lads, come on!
But it is a beauty.
Dennisili, 249 wickets, and there is the man that he has beaten, Richie Benaud. Richie Benaud almost as delighted for Dennisili as Dennisili looks up and waves to Richie Benaud, and the wave is returned.
Drake Tribble's got it. That is the record. Wicket-taking test match record. Old Dennis Lilly to give Lilly 310 wickets in test match cricket. Well, we've been watching him quite closely in his follow-through, and there's been nothing. It might just have been a twinge. Sometimes you get a twinge and then it'll untwinge.
Is there any way you can bring about an untwinging?
Yeah, but it's not the sort of thing you want to talk about in a family program. What a beauty. What a catch.
Oh, how good.
Legend.
The great
Yoda
man.
of cricket.
Great man. Hey, but right now it's time for Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
We're going back to Bangladesh for this one. Bangladesh's most popular cricketer, Shakib Al Hasan, has found himself embroiled in another controversy after a video of him hitting a fan has gone viral on social media. The Bangladeshi all-rounder was in Chattogram for a promotional event, and a huge, insane crowd showed up to see him. He managed to find his vehicle when a fan tried to seize his cap from his head, and in the uproar, Shakib completely lost his cool and repeatedly attacked the person with the cap, i.e. whacked them with the cap, before he was led away. Of course, he famously snapped at the umpires during the Bangladesh Premier League and has also scolded umpires for not awarding wides, all sorts of shenanigans. He's a bit of a psychopath. And so if you see him out there, I'd keep my distance.
Hey, fellas, check this out. Wrap your hands around this. Our mates at GM are helping part-time cricket battlers upgrade their bats. ACC and GM are giving away 3 GM cricket bats worth $1,200 each. All you need to do is tag ACC in a picture of your terribly old kit on Facebook or Instagram to be in to win. Text BAT to 32336 to learn more. And I saw one of those, and I had the pleasure of playing with one of those, or holding one of those bats. Bloody lovely bit of timber there, Dylan Cleaver.
Oh, it's a beautiful looking rig, and like I was more of a grey Nichols man myself, but I want one of those.
Yeah,
so
same.
I'm entering.
Well, one of them's mine. I'll let you know now.
Well, just to confirm, I saw you doing a demo of that bat, and I can confirm that bat is untouched following that over of bowling from Mike Lane. You got peppered and you forgot to use the bat, so good of you to maintain its perfection.
Thanks, mate. Hey, in terms of correspondence, we've got some fish and chips from Whitby from our old mate Tony Blaine. It's been a while.
Oh, I know. I was just so happy when we got that through.
Yes, indeed.
I was starting to worry.
And he says, fellas, what a win! I hope you're well. Shithouse weather here, snow all over and raining like a bar steward. New Zealand's brace of incredible last ball wins could be described as everything all at once and a real boost to the interest that Test cricket can still muster. There were too many terrific cameos and highlights to list. They just kept coming at the Basin and at Hagley, but I'd like to make special mention of Tom Blundell's keeping in the second innings at the Basin. It takes a special kind of courage and skill to stand up to genuine pace, especially when it's been consistently banged in. But the pressure he applied on the English batsmen was pivotal in trimming their ambitions. His refusal to allow them to take the liberty of marching at the bowlers, to my mind, was a key factor in defending the relatively modest 250 tally. As for the Hagley Test, obviously Kane was sublime, and Daryl Mitchell continues to impress greatly. If Trent and Big Jamo return to the fold, then I think we can get back to being our best again. All the best, lads. Blaney. Great stuff. Hey, now for your correspondence. If people want to get hold of us, Paul, what do they do?
Flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs of the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade on Facebook or Instagram. We've got a bunch of messages that have come through, so if we haven't read yours out, A and B, we might get to it, and C, we might not, but keep them coming.
Hey, here's one from Nick G. By the barest of margins, says he. A couple of thoughts as I listen to the pod. How gutted must Bolty be opting to go for the money in T20? And secondly, how good would Southey be if he played for Baz, Dylan Cleaver?
Yeah, nice points. Well made. I did think about Bolty a little bit during this last fortnight, and, you know, you never knock a man for setting up his family for life. But I did wonder if there were just one or two times where he thought, oh, geez.
Yeah, damn it.
Would have been nice. And, I mean, obviously he probably wanted to be as well.
Yes.
It was taken out of his hands to some extent. But as for the how good would Southey be if he played for Baz, well, he did play for Baz for many years, and he was pretty good.
Paul Ford.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I did see lovely Trenty was out boating with his old fellow cricketing brother, Jono Bolt. And it is interesting, like, these are going to be looked back. This is going to be looked back as a fortnight of cricket in New Zealand that will probably never be repeated in terms of the extraordinary results. And as a guy that would love his cricket, I'm sure he would have loved to have been a part of it. So, you know, I hope he's not hurting too much about that. And I guess the second point related to that is it's you'd have to say, with Trent Boult in our team and Kyle Jamieson and Colin de Grandhomme and BJ Watling and Ross Taylor, we might have won these games easy.
Yeah.
Without those guys, we win hard. And I guess from a cricket point of view, we've got these thrillers. But from an overall performance review, maybe we've come back to the pack. We used to win. We would be backing ourselves to give Sri Lanka at home a flogging, to be honest.
I think that's a really good point, actually. And that's been the reality for me in these last two test matches is we've had to dig really deep to win them. And it's not even against the Sri Lankans, it was a very hard-fought battle and could have gone either way. I've been impressed with Southee as skipper. And as we mentioned before, old Baz did want Southee as his vice-captain. I reckon that would have been a great combo.
Yeah, the only issue I'll take with that is I think, particularly in the bowling depth, we've been showing up, as we've mentioned earlier in this thing. We're probably one performing batter light, but that's mainly due to the intransigence around Henry Nicholls' spot in the order. But, I think Tom Blundell has been a magnificent replacement for BJ White.
Oh, yeah, and fair cop.
Possibly even in terms of just pure batsmanship, possibly even better. I know BJ had certain qualities that you can't kind of replicate, but he's been great. And would you like me to read Andy B? Or do you want to?
Andy B.
Andy B's got some good points too. A lot of passion in Andy B.
Yes, okay.
Okay. I'm frustrated, and although I've been married for 13 years, it's not what you think. My frustration is with the poor selection process New Zealand cricket has. While listening to your podcast and hearing the squad, fellow motorists may be forgiven for thinking that I was having a grand mal seizure combined with a berserker red-eye rage incident. While we had that beautiful victory at the Basin only a week ago, I never doubted the lads, by the way, I still feel that the team has a few puzzling selection omissions. Totally agree that Dee Bracewell should be evolved, or at least in the squad, so you've got your wish there, Andy B. He continues, if Lockie is bowling in the Plunkett Shield, he can bowl in tests. Whether far out is Ages, whether far out is Ish, and why are we persisting with the beast when he would have trouble turning the ball on a cobbled driveway? We have a World Cup in India this year, and if the Oz-India Test Series is anything to go by, India will be doctoring pitches to suit 90-degree turn. Anyway, thanks for listening. I can feel my blood cooling already as Southee just got the first of the day. Yours in frustration, Andy B. And I love the passion, Andy B. And I hopefully, since you've sent that, obviously, we've had another dramatic victory, and I hope that has soothed your fraying nerves even further.
Hey, other very exciting news, fellas, on the podcast front. The BYC, boys, has been shortlisted for Best Cricket Podcast at the Sports Podcasts Awards, and we need people to vote for us. So all you need to do is text BYC vote to 3236 to get the link to vote. So get into it.
Ah, yes, overdue recognition,
I should say so. Bloody oath. Bloody oath,
I'm going to
Paul?
text right now, and we'll share any prize that we get with our audience.
Totally, man. 100%. Go and do it. Vote BYC 3236. Indeed. Hey, Dylan, what's going on in the bounce, mate?
Oh, the bounce has been cricket lately. And
and why not?
And why not? Yeah, it's going very well, thanks, Jace. Dylan Cleaver, all one word, .substack.com. Get on and register. It's free. You can pay me if you like, probably a cup of coffee a month. But if you don't want to, you do not have to.
Great stuff, mate. Hey, well, listen, thanks to all of you out there for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Remember to rate us and subscribe to the podcast. Tell your mates all about it. We'll be back same time, same place next week.